It was the break of dawn, and a man's life hung by a thread. Bound to the back of a pickup truck, his captors thought he was helpless. But they didn't know there were 3 incredible heroes watching, ready to risk everything to save him. Who were these heroes, and how did they change his fate forever? Keep watching to find out. Before I show you what these brave dogs did next, can I ask you something small? If you believe no one should ever be abandoned, and dogs are the real heroes, please tap that subscribe button. Most people scroll past stories like this, but your one click could help this message reach someone who truly needs to hear it. Please subscribe to the channel and help us spread the word. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, a chilling scene was unfolding in the quiet morning. A man, tied to the back of an old pickup truck, struggled against his restraints. His captors had left him there, thinking he'd never escape, but they didn't realize that help was already on the way. Help in the form of 3 fearless dogs. Their instincts would lead them on a path that would alter the course of this man's life forever. The night had been long, far longer than it should have been. The cold air cut through the man's body like 1,000 icy needles, but it wasn't just the physical cold that made his bones shiver. It was the silence. Silence so profound it pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. His heart hammered against his ribcage, beating with a frantic rhythm that matched his racing thoughts. His hands were bound tightly behind his back, the ropes biting into his skin with every movement. The rough handling earlier that night had left his body aching and bruised. His wrists were raw, scraped by the coarse fibers of the ropes, while his legs throbbed with pain from being dragged across the gravel. He could still feel the grit on his skin, the taste of dirt in his mouth, as if the very earth had turned against him. The last thing he remembered was the blinding headlights of a truck, the sound of heavy boots slamming against the ground, and the jarring motion of being thrown into the bed of the pickup. Then, everything went dark. When he came to, he was lying on his stomach, bound to the metal railing of the truck bed, his face pressed against the cold steel. The truck's engine had long since faded into the distance, leaving behind only the sounds of the wind and the occasional distant cry of a bird. The men who had taken him had driven off, leaving him alone in the vast emptiness of the field. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? Why had they taken him? But even more pressing, why had they left him here alone, with no one around for miles? The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They weren't coming back. They had no intention of returning. The thought twisted his insides. His captors had abandoned him. They didn't care enough to finish the job themselves. They had left him to die in the wilderness, bound and helpless, exposed to the elements. A chill swept through him, not from the cold, but from the terrifying reality of his situation. No one would hear him if he screamed. No one would come to his aid. He was completely alone. The thought brought a wave of panic, but he fought it down. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not when there was still a chance. With every breath, his chest tightened further, and the ropes seemed to dig deeper into his skin. His arms were starting to numb from the lack of circulation, and his fingers tingled as they slowly lost all feeling. The cold was biting, and his mind began to wander. Was this how he was going to die? A slow, painful death, abandoned in the middle of nowhere, his fate sealed by the hands of strangers who didn't even care enough to finish what they had started? Desperation clawed at his throat. He couldn't move. He couldn't break free. The ropes were too tight, and his body was too weak. His eyes darted around in the dim light of the early morning, but there was nothing to see except the endless stretch of grass and trees. The truck's faded tracks were the only sign that anyone had ever been here. His thoughts drifted to his family, his wife, his children. What would they think when they never heard from him again? Would they even know what happened to him? And then, in the quiet, his thoughts turned to the one thing he had to hold on to. Hope. The hope that somehow, against all odds, someone would find him. Someone would come. Someone would save him. What the man couldn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand in his exhausted and terrified state, was that even in the darkest places, there are guardians, creatures who watch over the helpless, even when no human is around to notice. In the trees that lined the far edge of the field, just out of sight, 3 dogs were watching. They weren't just any dogs. These were creatures of loyalty and courage. Each one was different, but they shared a bond that transcended words. The first was a German shepherd, sleek and strong, its fur a deep golden hue that seemed to catch the faint light of dawn. The shepherd was the quiet one, its gaze sharp and unblinking. It had been trained for years to sense danger, to anticipate movements, and to protect. Its eyes swept over the landscape, never missing a detail. The second was a golden retriever, its coat shining like sunlight through morning mist. This dog was known for its warmth and intuition. It had spent countless hours beside its owner, a seasoned search and rescue worker. The golden knew the meaning of life or death decisions, and in this moment, its instinct screamed that someone was in dire need of help. The third was a scrappy mixed-breed mutt, small, with scruffy fur and a stubborn determination that made it a natural leader in its own right. Despite its size, it had the heart of a lion and a spirit that refused to quit. The mutt's eyes twinkled with excitement as it peered into the distance, sensing the same urgency that the other two dogs felt. They had been tracking for miles, following the faintest traces of scent. Each of them had their own reasons for joining the search. For the shepherd, it was duty. For the golden retriever, it was empathy. And for the mutt, it was simply knowing that something wasn't right, something that needed fixing. Their ears pricked up as they neared the edge of the field, their noses twitching in unison. They could smell the man. His scent was faint but distinct, mingled with the dirt, the truck, and something else, fear. The dogs didn't hesitate. They knew their mission. They weren't just following the man's scent. They were responding to a call, one that went far beyond simple instinct. They were the guardians now, the only hope this man had left. As the first rays of dawn started to stretch across the sky, casting a soft glow over the open field, the three dogs silently approached the truck. Every step they took was deliberate, every movement smooth and calculated. They had been trained for moments like this, when lives hung in the balance and every second counted. The golden retriever, the most experienced of the trio, was the first to move. Its paws barely made a sound on the soft earth, its tail held low, almost to the ground. The retriever was cautious but determined. It had seen danger before, and it knew how to stay focused. Behind it, the German shepherd moved with a quiet strength, its eyes scanning the field for any signs of danger. The shepherd knew the value of patience, and it wasn't going to rush. Every movement was calculated, every direction assessed. The mutt, with its unrelenting energy, moved quickly, darting between the trees and over rocks. Its eyes never left the truck. It was eager, full of nervous energy, but its instincts were sharp. It knew something was at stake. With every passing minute, the tension grew. The dogs were so close now, so close to their goal. They could sense the man's presence, the silent plea for help that seemed to emanate from his very being. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the world itself was holding its breath. But the man, unaware of the approach of his rescuers, was still struggling, still bound. His wrists ached, his body trembled. He had no idea that help was so close. He could only hope that somehow anyone, would find him in time. The closer the dogs got, the more urgent the situation became. The man's captors were not far away. The dogs knew they had to work quickly. Every second that passed was a second closer to disaster. Could they free him before the kidnappers returned? Or was it too late? The dogs moved with precision, their sense of time and place sharper than any human's. They didn't need to communicate with words. Their bond was unspoken but understood. They knew the risk, they knew the urgency, and they knew that if they didn't act now, they would lose everything. The fate of the man hung in the balance, and there was no turning back. The man's mind swirled with confusion and panic, but beneath it all, a single, powerful thought anchored him: survival. Every time his muscles strained against the ropes, a fresh wave of pain shot through his body. His chest tightened with each breath, each desperate attempt to loosen the ropes. His captors had done their work well, binding him securely. It felt as though the rope had become a part of him, a part of his torment, as it cut into his skin with a relentless, unforgiving grip. His pulse quickened, and the tremors in his hands worsened. His thoughts fluttered between fragments of memories, his wife's face, his kids' laughter, but those moments felt distant, unreachable, as if they belonged to another man altogether. Was he even the same person anymore? The man whose family would wake up in their cozy home, waiting for him? That version of him felt as though it were slipping away into the past, lost to the cold and desolate night. The wind, which had been soft at first, now picked up, howling as it swept through the field. The long grasses swayed and rattled, making the place feel alive in a way that only heightened his sense of dread. The cold bite of the night air began to seep through his thin clothes, and he shivered, his body growing weaker as the hours ticked by. He tried to call out, but his throat felt raw from the screams he'd already let out, screams that had been swallowed by the vast emptiness. His voice was a whisper now, barely audible, as if the world itself refused to listen. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life, any sign of salvation, but all he saw was an endless stretch of grass, interrupted only by the looming shadows of trees in the distance. But it wasn't the horizon the man needed to look toward. It was the forest, just beyond the field, where the tree stood silent and watchful. The dogs had arrived. They moved in unison, their bodies attuned to the rhythm of the chase, their paws soft against the earth as they crept toward the truck. The golden retriever, with its sharp instincts, led the charge, staying close to the ground. The German shepherd followed closely behind, its posture rigid with alertness. The mixed-breed mutt, the smallest but perhaps the most spirited, darted between them, its sharp eyes never leaving the truck. As they reached the edge of the field, the scent of the man grew stronger, sweat, fear, and something darker, a scent that tugged at the dog's instincts and pulled them forward with an urgency they couldn't ignore. The golden retriever slowed to a stop, its nose twitching as it took in the scene before it. The truck was just up ahead, the man still bound in the bed, his body still. The sun had not yet fully risen, but the first rays of light painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, casting an eerie glow over the field. But it wasn't the sunrise that caught the dog's attention. It was the man, the desperate, helpless man who had been abandoned by his captors, left to die. The golden retriever's muscles tightened as it crouched low, signaling to the others that it was time to act. The shepherd, always calm and focused, lowered its head, moving swiftly and silently through the grass. Its eyes were trained on the truck, its every sense locked on the objective. The mutt, eager and driven, was already darting ahead, nipping at the ground, its small tail wagging in an almost frantic rhythm. The German shepherd was the first to break the silence, its deep growl rumbling through the air as it made its way toward the truck. It was a low warning, a sound that carried no malice, but instead an unspoken command. It was a signal to the man, a signal that help had arrived, and that he wasn't alone anymore. But even as the dogs closed in, the man, still bound and unable to move, was unaware of their presence. His body, aching and stiff, had grown numb from the cold, and his vision blurred. Was this what it felt like to die, to fade into nothingness, alone in the wilderness, forgotten? The dogs were close now, just yards away, their paws barely making a sound. But there was no time to waste. The kidnappers could return at any moment, and their truck had already disappeared down the road once. They could come back. The man could already hear the distant sound of tires on gravel, but he didn't know if it was the sound of the kidnappers, or just his mind, racing toward the worst possible scenario. Every second counted now. The moment the dogs arrived, they didn't hesitate. The golden retriever, being the most experienced, took the lead and approached the truck's bed, its tail flicking in anticipation. The shepherd and the mutt flanked it, each of them assessing the situation with the precision of professionals. But the ropes, the knots were tight, far too tight. It would take all of their strength, all of their focus to free him. They had no room for mistakes. The sun was creeping higher in the sky, but that meant nothing in this life-or-death moment. The kidnappers could be just around the bend. The golden retriever's sharp teeth sank into the rope near the man's ankle, tugging with a careful yet forceful determination. The German shepherd paced around the truck, eyeing the situation from all angles. The mutt, excited and eager, nipped at the ropes near the man's wrists, its small teeth working tirelessly against the thick fibers. Minutes felt like hours. The man's heart thudded with every move the dogs made. He could feel the pull, the steady progress, but he couldn't help but wonder if it was all in vain. Could these dogs really save him? Was it even possible? The answer came as the ropes slowly began to loosen. It wasn't fast, but it was progress. Slow, steady, unrelenting progress. Then, the sound of a truck broke the stillness. The unmistakable rumble of the kidnapper's vehicle coming down the road was unmistakable. The dogs froze. Their ears shot up. The golden retriever's tail stood still. The shepherd's eyes narrowed. The mutt's body tensed, poised to spring. The man's heart sank. He didn't know how much time they had left. He could feel the ropes loosening, but the kidnappers could be here any second. The dogs, each one of them, knew this was their moment. They knew they had to act fast. If they didn't finish freeing the man now, it could all be for nothing. The truck's engine grew louder. The dogs sprinted into action. The golden retriever let out a sharp bark, signaling the shepherd and the mutt to keep going. It was time. The shepherd lunged forward, its powerful jaws gripping the rope and yanking. The mutt darted toward the man's chest, biting at the ropes there. The man's breath came in ragged gasps as he felt the final knot give way. His arms were free, but the truck was still a threat. He could hear the approaching truck, but he knew that he had to move fast. The dogs had given him a chance. They had risked everything for him. The man's heart raced, each beat a deafening echo in his ears as the truck's engine roared louder, its presence growing closer. The dogs had freed him, but the threat was far from over. Could they get him out in time? His breath came in shallow gasps, each one shaky and desperate, as he shifted his weight, struggling to free himself completely. The dogs, his only hope, were working tirelessly. He could feel the cold tug of the ropes loosening around his legs. The shepherd's teeth sank deeper into the knot, its jaw unyielding, as if it too understood the urgency of the situation. The golden retriever, tail stiff with focus, was working its way toward the last knot, and the scrappy mutt, smaller but no less determined, was darting between the two larger dogs, licking the man's face in a frenzied attempt to encourage him to hold on. But the truck was too close now. The man could hear the low growl of the engine, the crunch of tires against the dirt, and the faint hum of the vehicle's impending arrival. They had mere seconds left. Would the dogs finish in time? Could they get him out of here before the kidnappers returned? In the midst of this swirling chaos, the golden retriever let out a sharp bark, as if rallying the other dogs. It was time. The shepherd pulled again, this time with more force, its entire body straining as the rope finally snapped. The man's legs were free, completely untied. The mutt, not stopping for a second, darted to the man's arms and worked with frantic energy to loosen the remaining knots. This was it, the last push. The man's arms, numb from the prolonged restraint, were now free. He gasped, his body shaking uncontrollably as he tried to lift himself off the truck bed. He wasn't sure if he could stand, if his legs would even hold him, but he had to try. He had no choice. The truck's engine was so close now, its growl becoming louder with each passing second. The man's eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else beneath the terror. Hope. He looked at the dogs, the three unlikely saviors, who had come to his aid when no one else could. Their eyes met his, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. The man could feel their unwavering loyalty, their dedication. They had saved him. They had risked their lives for him, and in that moment, he knew that they would not stop until he was safe. With one last yank, the mutt freed the final knot from the man's wrists. He was free. Just as the final rope came undone, the unmistakable sound of tires against gravel echoed through the air. The truck was close, too close. The golden retriever, ears perked, looked up first, its muscles tensed and ready for action. The German shepherd's stance shifted, becoming more defensive as it instinctively placed itself between the man and the approaching truck. The mutt, undeterred by its small size, growled and barked in a fury, nipping at the man's feet to encourage him to get moving. The dogs weren't just protecting the man, they were preparing for a confrontation. The truck's headlights broke through the dark morning air, casting long shadows on the ground. The kidnappers were almost here. They were seconds away from ruining everything, but the dogs stood firm, showing no signs of fear. Their loyalty to the man was absolute. They would not let him be taken again. The German shepherd let out a low, menacing growl, its eyes locked onto the truck. The golden retriever raised its head, barking with an authoritative growl that seemed to shake the very air. And the mutt, small but fierce, continued to circle the man, ensuring that he stayed behind the protective shield of the dogs. The truck came to a screeching halt just yards away. The kidnappers, surprised to see the dogs, hesitated for a moment. They had been so sure of their success, so confident in their ability to dispose of the man. But now, they were confronted by three fearless dogs, standing as a wall between them and their target. For a few tense moments, no one moved. The kidnappers stared at the dogs, their expressions hard to read. They hadn't expected this. Then, the golden retriever barked again, and that single, sharp sound broke the stillness. The shepherd stepped forward, its muscles flexing, its stance unyielding. The mutt continued to circle, barking aggressively, trying to get their attention. The kidnappers, realizing that the dogs weren't backing down, exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear to the kidnappers that the situation was no longer in their favor. They could see that the man was no longer tied down, that he was on the verge of escaping. And those dogs, those heroic dogs, had shown them that they weren't just animals. They were protectors. In a split second, the kidnappers made their choice. Without warning, they slammed the truck into reverse and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The dogs watched as the vehicle disappeared down the road, their bodies still tense, but their faces now relaxing as they knew the danger had passed. The man, shaken and exhausted, could hardly believe what had just happened. He was free. He was alive. He had survived because of these incredible dogs, who had put themselves in harm's way to protect him. As the sound of the truck's engine faded into the distance, the man collapsed to his knees, his body finally giving in to the exhaustion and relief. His hands were raw, his legs weak, but his heart was full of gratitude. He looked at the dogs, who were now standing around him, tails wagging, tongues hanging out in exhaustion, but with the unmistakable satisfaction of a job well done. The golden retriever nudged his hand, as if to say, "We did it." The shepherd stood tall, ever watchful, making sure no further threats lingered. The mutt hopped up, licking his face with excitement, its small body wriggling in delight. In that moment, the man understood the incredible bond between animals and humans. These dogs had shown him the truest form of loyalty and bravery. They had given him a second chance at life. He didn't know how to repay them, but he knew he owed them everything. The man slowly rose to his feet, feeling the weight of his body strain, but also the overwhelming sense of relief. The sun had fully risen now, casting the world in its warm, golden light. The dogs stood around him, their eyes soft and filled with understanding. They had been his saviors, his unexpected heroes. He was free, thanks to these three extraordinary animals, who had risked everything for him. As he looked at them, he couldn't help but reflect on the incredible courage they had shown. They weren't trained to be heroes. They didn't ask for recognition or reward. They acted on pure instinct, driven by a bond that transcended words, a loyalty that was fierce and unwavering. The man owed his life to them, and in his heart, he knew he would never forget what they had done for him. If you were inspired by these brave dogs, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us for more incredible animal stories. You won't want to miss the next one.